Hey friend, Chris here from Logic Pro Rules, the website and channel that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Today's video is for the Atmos crowd. More specifically, those of us who are maybe considering getting to Atmos on a speaker-based system. Now, when you're first starting out getting set up for Atmos, I mean just in general, but especially when you're trying to set up an interface and speakers in your space, it could kind of feel like you're trying to launch the space shuttle. I mean, there's so much to consider. Your primary concern is number one, what interface or monitor controller do you need so that you can control and drive these 12 different speakers in your space, because most interfaces cap out at 8 or 10 outputs. Number two, what speakers do you need to pick up? And how are you going to fit them in your space? How are you going to mount them, especially above you? And just the list keeps going on. Time of arrival of every speaker to the listening position so you don't have a phasey comb filtering mess, bass management if your speakers can't handle the lower end of the spectrum, tuning the system so it sounds accurate. So I want to share with you today one such solution that I think is a really great solution. It's basically a one-stop shop for all your Atmos needs. And this is a bundle between two companies I'm a big fan of, and that's Apogee and IK Multimedia. This bundle these two companies have paired together to offer includes Apogee's latest interface offering, the Symphony Studio, which is basically an interface for multi-channel Atmos workflows, and 11 of IK's awesome iLoud MTM MK II speakers, plus 4 mounting brackets to get those height channels above you. So I'd like to give you a rundown of this bundle because it provides you, again, everything you need to get started in Atmos on a speaker system aside from a subwoofer. So let's take a look at the Symphony Studio first and then work our way into the iLoud MTM bundle. And I want to give you a brief overview of the Symphony Studio front panel and the different controls available to you. There are 8 buttons in total, 4 on the left, which are input controls, 4 on the right for output controls, plus an OLED in the center that shows you the most relevant information, and an encoder for scrolling and making selections. Out of the gate, the OLED will show you the different level meters for the different inputs and outputs of the Symphony Studio. Now, it's worth pointing out that this bundle between Apogee and IK offers 2 configurations of the Symphony Studio. First, there is the Symphony Studio 2x12, so that's 2 microphone preamps or 2 inputs and 12 outputs. So for your workflow, if you're mostly concerned with Atmos workflows, this provides up to 7.1.4 speaker arrangement, plus 2 microphone preamps if you record the occasional vocal or maybe acoustic guitar, while the second option for this bundle includes the Symphony Studio 8x16. So that's 8 microphone preamps or inputs and 16 outputs. So in the case that maybe you're multi-tracking your studio, the occasional drum kit or a couple performers, this covers those bases with 8 inputs, plus 16 outputs for speaker setup of up to 9.1.6, or maybe you have 7.1.4 and you have a couple headphone amps you want to drive, or some sort of outboard gear. On the left side, if I press on the input button, this allows me to select between the various inputs, microphone preamps of the Symphony Studio. And I can scroll through the different inputs using the encoder to the right of the OLED. When I press on the encoder, it selects that input. Now notice the channel button on the left side is now selected. I can immediately begin driving up the microphone preamp level just by turning the encoder. And on the display, you can see a very clear indication of what the level is being set at for this preamp. Now, if I press on the channel button, I have further options for this input, starting with analog level. So I could choose between either the microphone preamp of the Symphony Studio or switch it to a line level if I prefer to use an external preamp or some outboard gear with the interface. I can enable or disable phantom power for this channel using either the encoder and making that selection, or by pressing on the phantom power button to the left, enable or disable the awesome soft limit function of the Symphony Studio. So if your track is maybe a little hot, you're at risk of clipping, this will round out the transients to prevent clipping, plus a polarity invert button. On the right side of the display are buttons for selecting the different speaker and headphone outputs of the Symphony Studio. By pressing on the speaker output, you select that output, and you can see currently with the very obvious icon that the output is muted. By pressing on the encoder, I unmute the output, and I can turn the encoder to adjust the output level. And this will control all of the outputs as long as the outputs are set to speaker outputs for the Symphony Studio. So you can control the level of all 16 outputs simultaneously with this one knob. Pressing on the encoder again will mute the outputs. Plus, if I press on the speaker icon again, I have further options for mute and dim. The same goes for the headphone outputs, which includes a 1/4-inch input and an 1/8-inch input. And these are Apogee's fantastic 0-ohm headphone outputs, so they can handle any headphone that you plug into them. You can press on the encoder to mute or unmute the headphone output, turn the encoder to adjust the headphone level, press on the headphone button again for further control of mute and dim, and by pressing on the Apogee button in the upper right-hand corner, this brings you back to the level meter display. As you can see, the Symphony Studio provides you with direct control and access over the most important aspects of the interface, from the microphone preamps and inputs to the outputs and managing a multi-channel array. And if you have this racked up in your desk or console, well, there's no need for a separate monitor controller because, again, you can manage the level, mute, dim of 12 or 16 different speakers right from the interface. Now, I want to bring your attention to the Apogee Control 2 application because there's further options and functionality for input DSP and output DSP, and this is where you're going to set up your monitor workflows for a multi-channel setup. What I love about the Symphony Studio and other Apogee interfaces is that everything is digitally controlled. So you have direct access and control over the microphone preamps for each channel. You can enable phantom power, soft limit, and polarity invert. I can switch the analog level from microphone to line level right from the control app. And there are 2 direct software mixers. So let's say I'm recording a drummer or maybe a vocalist and an acoustic guitar player, and the performers want their own dedicated headphone mix. Well, instead of using Logic Pro software monitoring, I can use the near zero latency monitoring of the Apogee Control 2's mixers. So I can set levels and panning for both Mixer 1 and Mixer 2, and I can even assign both headphone outputs to listen directly to the 2 different mixers. Headphone 1 could be listening to Mixer 1, while the second headphone port could be assigned to Mixer 2. But even cooler is that the Symphony Studio also has input DSP in the form of Apogee's awesome ECS channel strip, which covers EQ, compression, and saturation. So in the case that you want to apply some dynamic control, a little shaping of the signal, even saturation, just make sure the effect is enabled, dial in your sound, and hit record. But do keep in mind, it's a print effect, so whatever you dial up here will be part of the sound that's recorded into Logic. Beyond the different inputs of the Symphony Studio are the playback channels, which is basically your computer audio and where they're playing through. And beyond that are the output channels of the interface with more functionality. On the left-hand side are system settings, and we're going to dive in here for setting up our Atmos system with the Symphony Studio. Under the output settings is the analog output setup window, which allows you to assign any of the outputs of the Symphony Studio to be either a speaker output, which would be the outputs that you connect to your various speakers and that you can control using the encoder or the software mixer, or you can assign outputs to line level if you're going to be sending audio out to external hardware. In the case of a 7.1.4 speaker setup, and a minimum analog outputs 1 through 12 would be assigned as speaker outputs. Below the analog output setup is the monitor workflow window. And this is where the action takes place for multi-channel setups. First is the main panel. On the left-hand side is the preset sidebar, which allows you to quickly switch between different monitor workflows. The first preset is a stereo monitor workflow. If I click on the second preset, then it switches to a 5.1 setup to 7.1.4. And you can see the speakers for these different configurations right in the main section. Notice too that the speaker icons for each output channel behind the monitor workflow window are also updating to reflect these different workflows. You can see that the left and right channels are in green, output 3 is kind of dimmed, and the remaining outputs set to speaker are in red. So obviously green means in action for that monitor workflow, and red means they're not available. And taking a look at the bottom of each output channel is assigned to a playback channel, going from playback 1 through 12, and beneath that is a selector for speaker set. Outputs 1 and 2 are set to speaker set 1, and output 3 is set to speaker set 2. So there's a lot to unpack here. First, what's a monitor workflow? In a nutshell, a monitor workflow is a saved snapshot of the source routing and settings for each of the outputs of the Symphony Studio, providing you a convenient way of switching between different monitoring setups, or even be able to switch between different sets of speakers. So if you take a look at the bottom right-hand corner of the Apogee Control app, you don't have to have this monitor workflow window open all the time to be able to switch between these different workflows. You can see here, I can switch between, again, stereo 5.1 and 7.1.4. And this makes it instant and easy to switch between these workflows. Plus, I can switch between different sets of speakers. So in the case of the stereo configuration, again, left and right are active as a stereo pair, but I've set output 3, in this case, my center speaker, to be an alternate speaker that I can listen to my mixes through. So let's say I'm working on a stereo mix and I have the entire mix routed to output 3 to listen to in mono. I can use those speaker set buttons to switch between the left and right channels to the center speaker. And thanks to iK's awesome X Monitor software for the entire lineup of iLoud speakers, I can actually change the voicing of my center speaker to sound like a variety of different speakers, from consumer devices like a cell phone or a television to hi-fi multimedia speakers and many different studio speaker types. Plus, you can purchase the separate Apogee Control remote for direct hardware access over the different speaker sets and output workflows, and much, much more. If you go right up to the top left corner of the Apogee Control 2 app, there is the remote assignment window, and you can assign functionality for the 8 different buttons and the encoder of the remote. You can save, customize, and switch between up to 8 different monitor workflows in the preset sidebar. And in the speaker layout of the main tab, you can actually solo and mute specific speakers. By clicking the individual speaker icons, I'm able to solo, or I can switch the mode to mute and mute specific speakers. When set to latch, you can mute or solo more than one speaker at a time, or with XOR enabled, you choose to mute or solo one speaker at a time. After that is the In-Out tab. Here you can assign custom names for each output channel, as well as the playback source. So just because your left speaker is plugged into output 1 doesn't mean it has to receive its source from playback channel 1. In this case, I could switch it to a completely different playback channel, or one of the direct mixers, or even a direct hardware input. You can adjust the trim for each output so that every speaker is playing back at the exact same volume. There's polarity invert for each channel. Plus, you're able to assign up to 2 outputs as dedicated subwoofers. Just keep in mind you'll need to keep the channel that is designated as the LFE or low frequency effects channel named as LFE. This is required for the Symphony Studio to know which channel is the LFE channel. From there is the bass management tab. Now, what is bass management? Well, let's say that the speakers you have in a multi-channel setup are a little on the small side, and they can't reproduce the low end of the spectrum effectively. Now, I will say the iLoud MTM MK IIs have tremendous bass. They pump out so much bass, it's kind of amazing for their size. But nonetheless, it's not uncommon to use a dedicated subwoofer to handle that low end of the spectrum so your speakers have more headroom to play back everything above a set frequency. So right here in the bass management tab of the Apogee Control app for Symphony Studio, you can actually route the low end of the frequency range to your subs. You can even specify on a per channel basis which sub the low end should be routed to. So for half the room, you could choose sub 1, and for the other half, you could choose sub 2, or even to both subwoofers. You can set the crossover frequency for each output, the filter slope for either 24 dB per octave or 12 dB per octave, as well as a trim control for each output to the subs. Lastly, we have the room correction tab, which provides you both the options for EQing each speaker output so you can tune them to your space using up to 16 bands of EQ for each output, as well as the ability to delay your outputs. Now, why would you need these options? Well, number one, because there's so many speakers firing at the listening position, and the fact that you're listening to so many speakers inside a space, there's a good likelihood the dimensions of your room, the room modes of the room are going to impact what you hear. Just a fact of life of playing sound in a space. With the EQ of the room correction tab, you can tune each speaker so it sounds more accurate as you're listening to the array. Now, I do have to point out the iLoud MTM speakers in this bundle actually include IK's own arc correction system. It's built right into the speakers and allows you to calibrate each speaker individually to sound accurate and flat in your space. It records the sound of test tones from each speaker through a MEMS microphone and figures out how the room is interacting with the speaker, and it adjusts the speaker for a more accurate presentation. It's fantastic. It's how I have my system set up. So in this case, you could use the iLoud's built-in arc correction to tune each speaker, and then use the EQ section of the room correction tab here to apply the Dolby Atmos music curve, which is an EQ curve that Dolby recommends for playback of Atmos tracks as you're mixing and producing. Now, the delay section at the bottom is also very important because with so many speakers playing back at the listening position, even though you may have gone to great lengths to try to make sure that every speaker is equidistant from the listening position, there's a likelihood that some of the speakers might be a little further away, a little closer, and these differences in time of arrival can actually smear or change what you're hearing at the listening position. So the delay section of the room correction tab allows you to delay the closer speakers to sonically arrive at the same time as the speakers that are further away, ensuring that you're listening to a phase coherent playback. Or if you're using a different set of speakers with the Symphony Studio, it's worth pointing out that there's actually a room correction simulator right within this tab. You can set the unit for imperial or metric, type in your room dimensions, identify the material for your floor, walls, and ceiling, then just click on Run Simulation. The simulation is based on math and not necessarily taking into consideration the furniture in your room or the speaker type or other anomalies, but can provide a quick way for you to identify how you might need to tune your speakers for your space. Once done, you can just click Apply, and the simulated room EQ curves will be applied to all of your speaker outputs. Now, I've spent a lot of time focused on the Symphony Studio portion of this bundle that Apogee and IK are offering, and that's because, number one, the interface provides a lot of functionality. And number two, there's a lot to consider and set up when it comes to a multi-channel speaker situation for Atmos. Now, on the iLoud MTM MK II front, the 11 speakers and 4 mounting brackets that you get with this bundle, I'm going to keep it short and sweet because, first, I have a whole video dedicated to my love for the iLoud MTM MK IIs, and I'll include a link in the video here and in the description below so you can check that out. That'll cover all those bases, but in a nutshell, why I think this is a really great bundle for you to pick up is obviously the interface provides everything you need, and the iLoud MTM Mark IIs, you get 11 in total, so all you need is a subwoofer, and you can tune each speaker thanks to the built-in arc correction system. Again, you get a MEMS microphone that you connect to each speaker, and you can run the calibration process right from each speaker or using the X Monitor software that's available to you from IK. So it's really easy to place them. They don't take up a bunch of space and they sound amazing. They have so much bass for their size. It's incredible. But when you tune each speaker, they're going to sound accurate and flat, and it's just a fantastic listening experience. And that's what I have set up here in my studio. So if you're looking to jump into Atmos on a speaker-based system, I think this bundle is well worth a look because, one, you get an interface that covers all those bases, all those considerations of monitor workflows, bass management, timelining, even EQing the outputs. And then you have 11 speakers and 4 mounting brackets that you can tune on a per speaker basis, and they're completely capable. They sound fantastic. I hope this video was helpful for you, and I'll check you for more later next week. Take care.